In the cold darkness of space, far beyond the bright rings of a dying star, one alien scientist watched the humans. Her name was Zira of the Zilari, and her task was simple: study mankind, judge their nature, and report to the council. But for Zira, there was no question. She already knew what her answer would be. To her, humans were violent. They were impulsive. They were dangerous. Their entire history was filled with blood and battles. She had read their records, seen the endless reports of war. She had seen images of burning cities, broken worlds, and soldiers marching into fire. Without fear, her mind was firm. They are barbarians. Aggression guides them like a shadow. They cannot be trusted. Yet she was not here by choice. The Zilari High Council demanded proof before making their decision. Humanity wished to join the Great Galactic Alliance. If accepted, they would be free to share knowledge, trade, and technology. If rejected, they would be kept under strict watch, forever seen as outsiders. And so Zira had been sent on a mission, not to fight, not to conquer, but to meet a human captain. A single human who, according to reports, represented both the best and the worst of their kind. His name was Captain Elias Kane. The very name carried whispers. Kane was known across the stars for his battles. He had fought in the Orion Rift War, where his fleet faced enemies that outnumbered them 3-1. Records showed he never surrendered. He never retreated. And in every story he was described with the same word: ruthless. To Zira, it was proof enough. Humans were aggressive to their core, and Kane was their champion of violence. But still, the council demanded she see him. Her ship, small and elegant, drifted silently toward the massive human vessel. It was not like the ships of her people. Zilari ships were smooth, silver, and curved like art in motion. Human ships were different, angular, sharp, built for war. The one before her was like a giant blade floating in space, its hull marked with scars from past battles. Zira felt her chest tighten. Every line of the human vessel screamed aggression. Even when they built machines, they built them for survival and strength. Her assistant, a younger Zilari named Terran, spoke nervously beside her. "Do you believe this captain will harm us?" he asked, his voice soft, unsure. Zira's eyes stayed on the screen, watching the dark shadow of the human warship. "He will not harm us," she said. "Not openly. But he will show us his true nature. They always do." She pressed her hand against the console, sending a signal. Across the void, the human ship responded. A corridor of light extended, a docking tunnel pulling her vessel toward the human airlock. This was the moment. There would be no turning back. As the docking seals locked into place, Zira's thoughts grew heavier. She remembered the last report she had studied, the Siege of Vega. In that battle, Kane had ordered his forces to fight against impossible odds. Entire squadrons were lost, thousands of lives burned away, and yet in the end the humans had won. The Zilari called it wasteful aggression. Humans called it courage. To Zira, it was madness. What kind of species chose death again and again, and still claimed it as victory? The airlock hissed. The door opened. For the first time, Zira stepped aboard a human starship. The floor was hard metal, the walls lined with weapons and monitors. The air carried the faint smell of fuel and iron. Human soldiers stood on each side, dressed in dark uniforms, eyes sharp and cold. Every one of them looked like they were ready for war, even here, even now. And then, at the end of the corridor, he appeared. Captain Elias Kane. He was taller than she expected, his shoulders broad, his face cut by lines of battle and age. His eyes were steady, not wild, not angry, just steady, like a soldier who had seen too much and forgotten how to fear. His uniform was plain, marked only with the symbols of command. Zira felt her heart race. She had expected a monster. Instead, she saw a man. Still, she did not trust him. Kane stopped before her. For a moment, silence filled the air. The human soldiers stood still, waiting for their captain's command. Zira's own assistant shifted uncomfortably at her side, and then Kane did something she did not expect. He raised his hand. Not to strike, not to threaten, but to salute. "Welcome aboard," he said. His voice was calm, deep, and controlled. "You must be Zira of the Zilari." Zira stared at him, her thoughts tangled. A greeting? Respect? She had studied hundreds of human battles, but not once had she read about kindness. Her voice came cold, sharper than she meant. "You are the one they call ruthless." Kane's lips curved slightly, not a smile, but something close. "Ruthless?" he repeated. "That's one word for it. I prefer determined." For a moment, the air between them grew heavy. Two worlds, two beliefs, standing face to face. Zira's. Mine whispered again. "He is dangerous. He is human. And humans cannot be trusted." But somewhere deep inside, another thought flickered, quiet, almost hidden. Why does he not look like the monster I imagined? The meeting chamber aboard the human ship was small but strong, built not for beauty but for survival. The walls were thick metal, the table heavy and plain. Screens on the far side showed the endless stars, cold and silent. Zira sat stiffly, her eyes on the man across from her, Captain Elias Kane. She expected anger, a harsh voice, maybe even arrogance. Instead, Kane sat calmly, his hands folded on the table. His posture was straight, his eyes steady. He looked like a soldier carved from stone. For a long moment, there was silence. Only the soft hum of the ship's engines filled the air. Finally, Zira spoke. Her voice was sharp, controlled. "You are the human captain the council warned us about, the one they call ruthless." Kane did not flinch. He leaned back slightly, studying her with those calm, unreadable eyes. "Ruthless," he said again as if tasting the word. "That's what enemies call me. My crew calls it survival." Zira's jaw tightened. "Survival? You destroy entire fleets. You sacrifice thousands. You call it survival, but it is nothing more than barbaric aggression." Kane's lips curved, faintly. Not a smile, but not anger either. Something else. "You think you understand us," he said softly, "but you've only read about our wars. You've never stood in the fire. You've never seen what happens when mercy means extinction." Zira's eyes narrowed. "Mercy is not weakness. Violence is weakness. It is proof your species cannot control its impulses." Kane leaned forward, his voice lower now, like steel wrapped in calm. "Tell me, Zira of the Zilari, when your people were attacked by the Arkan raiders a century ago, what did you do? Did you not fight back?" Zira stiffened. His words struck a nerve. The Arkan raiders had once invaded Zilari colonies, burning villages and enslaving their kind. The Zilari had fought back, yes, but they had done it with regret, not with pride. "That was different," she said quickly. "We fought because we had no choice. But you humans, you fight even when you have peace. You create war when there is no need for it." Kane's eyes did not leave hers. "And yet," he said, "your people survived because you fought. If you had chosen peace that day, you would not be here to judge me now." The room grew heavy with silence again. Zira could feel her assistant, Taryn, shifting nervously beside her. The human guards at the door stood still, but their eyes flickered between the two leaders as if they too felt the tension rising like a storm. Zira forced herself to breathe. She would not let this human twist her thoughts. "You humans always justify blood with more blood," she said. "That is why the council hesitates to trust you. Aggression is in your nature. It blinds you. It consumes you." Kane's voice sharpened, but his control did not break. "Aggression is in our nature." "Yes, but do you know what else is in our nature? Loyalty, protection, sacrifice. You call us barbaric because we fight. But we fight for something, for our homes, for our families, for each other." Zira shook her head. "You dress it in noble words, but it is still violence. Violence cannot build a future." Kane's gaze did not soften. Without violence, there would be no future to build. The words hung in the air like a blade between them. For a moment, Zira felt her chest tighten. His voice was not cruel, not angry. It carried weight, like a truth he had lived through, a truth she could not yet understand. She wanted to argue again, to strike back with logic and reason. But his eyes did not look like those of a man who enjoyed blood. They looked like those of a man who had carried it, heavy and unshakable. The chamber doors slid open with a hiss. A young human officer stepped in, saluting sharply. "Captain," the officer said. "Scanners report movement on the edge of the sector, unknown signatures." Zira turned her head quickly. Unknown signatures? Were there other ships nearby? Was this a trap? But Kane did not look alarmed. He nodded once to his officer. "Maintain position. Stay on alert," he ordered. The officer saluted again and left. When the door closed, Kane looked back at Zira. "You came here expecting a monster," he said. "You'll find I am not so simple. Aggression is not chaos, Zira. It is not madness. It is a tool. Like fire. In the wrong hands, it destroys. In the right hands, it saves." Zira's lips parted, but no words came. Her mind wrestled with the thought. Fire. Yes, her people had once used fire to destroy forests and drive out prey. But later, they learned to control it. For warmth, for light, for survival. Was that how humans saw aggression? No. She shook her head quickly. She would not fall into his trap. "You speak well, Captain Kane," she said coldly. "But words cannot change truth. My council will see what you are. They will see the danger you carry in your blood." Kane rose slowly to his feet. His shadow stretched long across the metal floor. "Then stay," he said. "Watch me. Judge me with your own eyes, not with the stories you've been told. If you still believe I am nothing but a barbarian, then report it. But don't confuse survival with cruelty. One day, you may see the difference." Zira remained seated, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. This was only the beginning. Already he had planted doubts in her mind, seeds she did not want to water. But deep inside, she felt it. For the first time, she was not certain. Perhaps this human captain was not the monster she expected. And perhaps that was even more dangerous. The chamber grew colder, though no temperature had changed. It was the silence, the kind of silence that carried the weight of two worlds colliding. Zira sat upright, her silver eyes locked on the human captain across the table. Captain Elias Kane stood still, his arms behind his back, his face calm. He looked like a man carved from discipline, a man who had been shaped by battle and could not be bent by words alone. Zira broke the silence. "You speak of survival," she said, her voice sharp. "But survival without restraint is destruction. Humanity cannot stop fighting. Even when peace is possible, you seek war. This is why the council hesitates." Kane tilted his head, his eyes narrowing slightly, not in anger, but in thought. "You speak as if peace is always possible," he replied. "Tell me, Zira, have you ever faced an enemy that does not want peace? An enemy that comes only to conquer, to erase, to burn?" Zira hesitated. Images of her people's past flickered in her mind, the Arkan raiders, the burning colonies. But she forced herself to remain firm. "Yes," she said. "But we do not glorify the violence that follows. We fight, then we grieve. You humans fight. And then you sing songs about it." Kane's lips twitched faintly. Not amusement, not anger, something between. "Perhaps because we know grief too well," he said quietly. "If we only mourned, we would drown in sorrow. So we remember. In song and story and honor, you see glory, we see memory." Zira felt a flicker in her chest, something unsettled. She did not like it. She leaned forward, her voice sharper now. "No matter how you wrap it, Captain, your kind feeds on violence. It is your nature. You cannot change what you are." Kane's eyes locked on hers, steady, unblinking. "And what if our nature is not only violence?" he asked. "What if aggression is not just destruction? What if it is also the strength to protect?" The word struck her harder than she expected. For a moment she had no answer. Her assistant, Taran, spoke nervously beside her, his voice almost a whisper. Zira. Perhaps we should not. Silence, Zira snapped, cutting him off. Her pride burned too hot. She would not let this human captain twist her mission. But Kane did not flinch. His voice remained calm, though it carried a weight that filled the room. You judge us by the wars we fought, but you forget why we fought them. Without aggression, we would have been erased long ago. Against empires larger than us, against threats stronger than us, we survived because we refused to bow. Zira's hands tightened on the edge of the table. And in doing so, she said, you nearly erased others. How many species have fallen under your fire? How many enemies are dust because humans refuse to stop? Kane's reply was immediate, sharp as a blade. How many would you have us sacrifice instead? How many children should we leave undefended? You call it cruelty. I call it duty. The room pulsed with tension as if even the walls were listening. Zira's heart pounded faster. She hated the way his words pressed against her thoughts, hated that they did not crumble as easily as she had hoped. She opened her mouth to strike again. But then, the ship trembled. A low alarm began to hum through the chamber. The lights flickered red. Kane's expression hardened instantly. What is this? Zira demanded, rising to her feet. The doors slid open. The same young officer from before rushed in, his face pale, his breath quick. Captain, unidentified vessels emerging, at the edge of the system. No alliance signatures, weapons powered. Kane moved like a man stepping into a role he knew too well. Calm, precise, ready. How many? He asked. 6 ships, the officer said. They're spreading formation. We're in their sights. Zira's chest tightened. 6 ships? Out here? This was supposed to be neutral ground. Her mind raced. Was this a human trick? A trap to prove their strength? Kane turned to her, his voice steady. Do your people know anything about this? Zira's eyes flashed. You accuse us? Perhaps this is your doing. But Kane shook his head. If it were my doing, Zira, you wouldn't still be alive to argue with me. The officer looked between them nervously. Orders, Captain? Kane's gaze remained on Zira as he spoke. Shields up. Hold position. Do not fire unless fired upon. The officer saluted and hurried out. Zira frowned. She had expected him to attack immediately, to show the violent reflex she believed all humans carried, but he had not. He had chosen caution. She studied him, suspicion gnawing at her certainty. You will not strike first? She asked slowly. Kane shook his head. Aggression has its place, but not blind aggression. If they come for us, we'll be ready. If not, I will not start a war. The words unsettled her. They were not the words of a barbarian. Still, she clung to her belief. You delay only because you fear the council's judgment, she said. Kane gave a faint smile, cold, controlled. No, I delay because one wrong move could cost lives. You think we fight because we love it. The truth is, we fight because we cannot afford not to. Remember that. The alarm deepened. Another officer's voice came through the comm. Captain, enemy ships are locking weapons. Zira felt her breath catch. This was it. The moment she would see the monster inside him. Kane's eyes hardened like steel. Then, he said, his voice calm but final, we show them what happens when you threaten my crew. He turned to his guards. Battle stations. Prepare to engage. The room came alive with movement. Humans rushing with purpose, alarms echoing through the ship. Zira stood frozen, her heart racing. For the first time, she was about to see the truth. Not in reports, not in records, but with her own eyes. Would this man prove her right? Would he show her the barbaric human aggression she despised? Or would he show her something else? The hum of the alarms echoed through the corridors. Red lights pulsed across the human starship like a heartbeat, steady and urgent. Outside, 6 unknown vessels cut through the void, forming a predator's circle around the ship. Zira stood in the command chamber, her silver eyes fixed on the glowing star map. Red dots, enemy ships, surrounded them like wolves around prey. The human vessel was alone, a single blade against a pack of teeth. Her chest tightened. This was it. The moment she had predicted. The moment when Captain Elias Kane would unleash the violence she was certain lived in every human heart. She waited for him to give the order. Attack. But Kane did not. He stood at the center of the bridge, tall and unmoving, his face calm as stone. Officers rushed around him, voices sharp, hands flying across controls. "Shields at full strength," one shouted. "Enemy weapons charging," another reported. Still, Kane's voice came low, measured. "Hold fire." The officers obeyed instantly, but some exchanged nervous glances. To wait was dangerous. To wait was to risk everything. Zira's eyes narrowed. "Why do you delay?" she demanded. "They prepare to strike. Do you want them to destroy you before you act?" Kane's gaze flicked toward her, steady, unshaken. "I do not waste lives on fear," he said. "If they fire first, then we respond. Until then, we wait." Zira's lips parted, disbelief burning in her chest. Wait? A human? Waiting? She had studied them all her life, and never had she seen patience in their nature. The first shot came. A beam of energy sliced across the shields, crackling sparks through the bridge. The ship shuddered, metal groaning under the impact. Officers gripped their stations, voices rising. Direct hit on forward shields. Shields holding at 80%. Kane's expression did not change. His voice cut through the chaos, clear and steady. Target the lead vessel. Fire only to disable weapons. Precision, not destruction. "Captain?" one officer asked. Uncertain. "Follow my order," Kane said firmly. Moments later, human weapons fired. Not wild barrages, not the savage storm Zira had expected, but controlled bursts of light. The lead enemy ship trembled, its weapons sparking as power lines severed. It spun out of formation, disabled but not destroyed. Zira blinked. This was not barbaric rage. This was calculation. The enemy retaliated. 2 ships broke formation, circling, to strike the human vessel from the flanks. The bridge shook again as shields absorbed more fire. "Shields at 60%, an officer shouted. "Compensate," Kane ordered. "Redirect auxiliary power, do not break formation." His tone was calm, not cruel. Command flowed from him like water, measured and sure. His crew moved with precision, not panic. Zira's heart raced. She could not deny what she saw. This was not the chaos of a violent species. This was order. This was discipline. Still, she held to her belief. It is only strategy. He waits now, but soon he will strike with true human savagery. The enemy fleet pressed harder. 2 more ships moved closer, their weapons glowing hot. The human vessel groaned under the assault. Sparks flew across the bridge. Taryn, Zira's young assistant, clung to a railing, his voice shaking. "We must retreat." Kane turned his head sharply. "Retreat, and they'll tear us apart from behind. Stand firm." Zira frowned. "You risk everything. A single mistake, and you will all be ash." Kane's eyes met hers, steady, unwavering. "Every battle risks death," he said. "But survival isn't found in panic, it's found in control." He turned back to his crew. "On my mark, strike their engines, disable, don't destroy." The humans obeyed. Precise shots tore through the void, cutting the engines of a second enemy ship. It spun helplessly, drifting away from formation. One by one, Kane dismantled. The enemy fleet, not with reckless fury, not with hunger for blood, but with cold precision. His ship bled, yes, but his crew followed him without hesitation. He did not sacrifice them carelessly. He guided them like a blade in steady hands. Zira felt her certainty begin to crack. This was not what she had expected. Not at all. She whispered, under her breath almost to herself. Aggression, but controlled. Kane's voice carried across the bridge again, firm and final. Lock weapons on the remaining ships. Signal them. Stand down, or we finish what they started. The officer at comms nodded and sent the message. A tense silence followed. Every breath on the bridge held tight. On the star map, the 4 remaining enemy ships shifted, their weapons dimmed. Slowly, carefully, they pulled back into the void. Within moments, the hunters had vanished, retreating into the black sea of stars. The bridge exhaled. Relief spread like quiet fire. Damage report, Kane ordered. Shields at 40%, minor hull damage, no critical systems down, an officer replied. Kane nodded once. Good work. See to the wounded. Zyra stared at him, her thoughts a storm. She had expected fire. She had expected destruction. But instead, Kane had shown restraint, precision, protection. He had saved his crew, defended his ship, and yet, he had spared his enemies. This was not the monster she had come to judge. Why? She asked finally, her voice low, uncertain. Why did you not destroy them? You had the power. You could have crushed them all. Kane looked at her, his eyes steady as ever. Because destruction was not needed, he said. Victory is not about how many ships burn. It's about how many lives are saved. Zyra's breath caught. His words pierced deeper than she wanted to admit. For the first time in her life, she wondered if she had been wrong. And in that moment, Zyra of the Zilari realized something terrifying. Human aggression was not only about destruction. Sometimes it was about protection. And that truth frightened her more than any battle ever could. The bridge was quiet again, though the echoes of battle still lingered in the air. Screens flickered with faint static. Engineers worked quickly to patch systems, and the smell of burned circuits hung heavy. The crew moved with discipline, but their faces showed the weight of what they had just survived. Zyra stood at the edge of the command deck, her silver eyes fixed on the stars. The enemy ships were gone, but the silence felt wrong, too sudden, too easy. And then the comms officer stiffened. Captain, she said, her voice tight. Incoming transmission. Kane turned sharply. From who? From the enemy vessels, she replied. They wished to speak. A hush spread through the bridge. All eyes turned to the captain. Kane nodded once. Put them through. The main screen flickered to life. A shadowed figure appeared, alien features sharp and cruel. Its voice was harsh, echoing like metal scraping stone. Human captain, it growled. You fight well, too well, but your victory is not complete. We will not leave without what we came for. Zyra's chest tightened. What they came for. The figure leaned forward, its glowing eyes fixed directly on her. The Zilari woman, the scientist, give her to us, do this and we will spare your ship. Refuse, and you will all burn. The bridge froze. Zyra felt every gaze turn toward her. Her assistant Terran gasped softly, clutching her arm. Kane's expression did not change. He stood straight, his eyes locked on the enemy. You came for her? He asked, his voice calm but edged with steel. Yes, the figure hissed. Her knowledge belongs to us. She carries secrets we require. Hand her over, human. Save yourself. Save your crew. Zyra's heart pounded. This was it. The moment she had expected. A human captain faced with a choice. Protect his crew, or sacrifice the outsider who had done nothing but insult him. She almost spoke, almost told him to do it. To give her away to save his people. It would be logical, it would be expected, and yet, a strange fear gripped her chest. What would he choose? The silence stretched. Every second felt heavy. Officers shifted uneasily, waiting for the order. Then, Kane spoke. His voice was steady, sharp, and final. No. The enemy's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said no, Kane repeated. She is under my protection. If you want her, you'll have to go through me. And through every soul on this ship. The bridge seemed to hold its breath. Zyra's own chest tightened as the words sank in. Why? Why would he choose her? The alien hissed, rage twisting its face. Do you defy us, human? For the life of one outsider, you would sacrifice your crew? Fool! Kane stepped closer to the screen, his eyes like steel. "My crew knows what I stand for," he said. "We do not trade lives for peace, not hers, not anyone's." Behind him, his officers straightened, their eyes fierce with loyalty. No one spoke against him. No one begged him to reconsider. Zira felt her pulse quicken. She could not understand. Yet he had no reason to protect her. She was not human. She was not his responsibility. She had mocked him, accused him, doubted him, and yet he stood as her shield. "Why?" the enemy growled, slamming a clawed fist against its console. "Then you will all die." The transmission cut off. The screen went black. Instantly, the bridge flared with alarm. "They're charging weapons," an officer shouted. "Shields at 40%, one more hit could break us." Zira turned to Kane, her voice sharp with desperation. "Why? Why would you do this? You could have ended it by giving me up." Kane's eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. "Because you are in my care," he said simply. "You came aboard under my watch. That makes you my responsibility, and I do not abandon those under my protection." Zira's breath caught. The words were plain, simple, but heavy with something she had never understood before. It was not logic. It was not strategy. It was something deeper. Loyalty. Sacrifice. The kind of bond she had never seen among her own people. The ship shook violently as another blast slammed into their shields. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Consoles flickered. Officers scrambled, shouting, "Updates, shields down to 20%. "We can't hold much longer." Kane's voice rose above the storm. "Arm forward batteries. Target their command ship. Prepare counterattack." The crew obeyed without hesitation. Zira clutched the railing, her mind a whirlwind. She had believed humans fought only for blood, only for dominance. But now she saw a different truth. They fought because they would not let go of each other. They fought not just for survival, but for those beside them. And Kane, this man she had called Barbaric, was about to risk everything for her. Her. The outsider who had doubted him. Her voice trembled. "Captain, I do not understand. Why protect me when it may cost you everything?" Kane glanced at her once, his eyes calm but fierce. "Because," he said, "if I gave you up, I would no longer be the man my crew believes in. And if that day comes, Zira, then I am no captain at all." The ship roared as human weapons fired back, a storm of light ripping through the void. The enemy fleet surged forward, but Kane stood firm, guiding his crew with steady commands. Zira's heart pounded as she watched him. The human she thought was a monster had just made the most illogical, most impossible, and most human choice she could imagine. And in that choice, something inside her began to break. Her certainty, her judgment, her belief that aggression was only barbaric. For perhaps the first time in her life, Zira wondered if she had been wrong. The bridge trembled with the storm of war. Red lights flashed, sparks fell from broken panels, and the deep hum of the engines filled the air as the human ship pushed itself into battle. Outside, the enemy vessels closed in like predators smelling blood. Zira gripped the railing tightly. Her silver eyes darted across the glowing screens, watching as red enemy markers pressed closer and closer. Her breath caught with each alarm, each report of failing shields. She had expected Kane to fall quickly, expected the human ship to collapse under the weight of 6 attackers. But Kane did not falter. He stood at the center of the chaos like an anchor in a raging storm. His voice was steady, sharp, never rising to panic. "Portside, adjust trajectory 3 degrees. Bring auxiliary cannons online. Target their weak points." His crew moved with flawless precision, responding instantly. The human ship twisted, through space, not running, not surrendering, but striking back with surgical force. The first counterattack hit. Human cannons lit the void with bursts of light, tearing through one of the enemy ships. Not destroyed, just disabled, engines burning out, weapons silenced. Zira's eyes widened. Again, Kane had chosen precision, not slaughter. The enemy swarmed closer. 2 ships cut across their flank, firing in unison. The human vessel shook violently, throwing officers against walls. Taryn, Zira's assistant, stumbled to the floor, fear written across his face. "We cannot win," he cried. "There are too many." Kane did not even glance at him. His focus never wavered. "Divert power from non-essential systems," he commanded. "Keep the shields alive. Hold the line." Zira stared at him, disbelief mixing with something else, something she did not want to name. How can he stand so calm when death surrounds him? Another strike came, heavier this time, alarms blared. "Captain, shields at 15%, shouted an officer. Zira's heart pounded. This was the end. Surely now Kane would break. Surely now he would unleash the wild aggression she had always feared. But instead, Kane gave an order that stunned her. "Prepare boarding teams." The crew froze, then looked at him with fierce determination. Not one questioned the command. Zira's eyes narrowed. "Boarding? You cannot mean—" "Yes," Kane said firmly. "We'll take the fight to them. They expect us to crumble. We'll strike where they don't expect it." The human officers moved quickly, grabbing weapons, preparing armor. They moved not like bloodthirsty killers, but like soldiers ready to protect each other at any cost. Zira felt something twist inside her. She had come expecting monsters. Instead, she saw men and women willing to risk everything for one another. Minutes later, the boarding craft launched. Zira found herself among them, not by choice but because Kane had insisted. "You want to judge us?" he had said. "Then see us up close." Now, strapped into a rattling transport shuttle, Zira's heart raced. Across from her, Kane sat, steady, helmet under his arm, his expression unreadable. His soldiers checked their weapons with quiet focus. No one spoke of glory. No one boasted. They prepared in silence, like people who knew the weight of what waited for them. The shuttle shuddered as it cut through enemy fire. "Breach in 5, the pilot called. Zira's pulse thundered in her ears. She was not a warrior. She was a scientist. But she was here among humans flying into the jaws of death. And Kane. Kane looked as if he had been born for this moment. The shuttle slammed into the enemy ship with a metallic roar. The hatch blew, open. Instantly, chaos erupted. Enemy soldiers poured in, their weapons blazing. The humans met them head-on. Kane was the first out, his weapon firing with deadly precision. He moved like a force of nature, not wild, not reckless, but controlled. Every shot had purpose. Every step shielded his crew. Zira crouched behind cover, her heart hammering as the battle raged. She had expected screams, rage, cruelty. Instead, she saw something different. Humans fought side by side, pulling each other back when wounded, covering each other with fire. Aggression was here, yes, but it was not chaos. It was unity. Beside her, Taryn trembled. "They are mad," he whispered. "Running into death so willingly." Zira shook her head slowly, eyes locked on Kane as he pushed forward, rallying his people. "No," she whispered back. "Not mad. Something else." The humans drove deeper into the ship. Kane led them with unwavering focus, his voice cutting through the smoke. "Push forward. Secure the engine room. Keep tight formation." Zira followed, fear gripping her. But another feeling rising too, awe. The man she had thought a barbarian was showing her something she had never imagined. Aggression not as destruction, but as courage, loyalty, sacrifice. When a blast of fire erupted near them, Kane shielded her with his own body, dragging her. "To cover, you all right?" he asked quickly. She stared at him, breathless. Why protect me again? I am not your crew." Kane's eyes met hers, fierce and steady even in the storm. "Because you're here. And if you're here, you're mine to protect." They reached the enemy engine room at last. With precise strikes, Kane's crew disabled the core. The ship trembled, its systems failing. The enemy soldiers retreated, chaos consuming them. Kane gave the order to withdraw. The humans pulled back with discipline, dragging their wounded, covering every retreating step. Moments later, they were back aboard, their own ship leaving the enemy vessel crippled, drifting in silence. On the bridge again, Zyra stood in stunned silence. She had seen humans fight up close now, she had seen their aggression, but it was not what she thought. It was not hunger for blood. It was not blind chaos. It was fire, burning, dangerous but controlled. A fire that protected as much as it destroyed, and in that fire, Zyra felt something new rise within her: respect. For the first time, she looked at Captain Elias Kane not as a monster, not as a barbarian, but as something else entirely. A protector, and perhaps something more. The stars drifted quietly beyond the scarred windows of the human vessel. The battle was over. The enemy ships, broken and powerless, floated like ghosts in the void. The hum of the engine steadied as repairs began, and the smell of smoke lingered faintly in the corridors. On the bridge, silence settled after the storm. Officers worked in hushed tones, tending to damaged systems and carrying wounded crewmates to medbays. Every movement carried both exhaustion and relief. They had survived. Again. Zyra stood at the edge of the command deck, staring at the star map, where the red enemy markers had faded into nothing. Her silver eyes were wide, her thoughts restless. She had expected destruction, endless blood, savage cruelty. Instead, she had seen something that shook her entire understanding. She had seen humans fight with fire, yes, but fire guided by loyalty. Aggression turned not into chaos, but into protection. She had seen a captain who risked his life and his crew not for conquest, not for glory, but for her, and she could not understand why. Captain Elias Kane stood at the center of the bridge, his posture tall, though his uniform was torn and dusted with smoke. His face was calm, though lines of fatigue etched deeper into his features. He spoke quietly to his officers, issuing orders, checking on the injured. He did not stand as a conqueror. He stood as a guardian, making sure his people were safe. Zyra found her voice, though it trembled. "You should have given me to them." Kane turned, his eyes steady as ever. "No, that was never an option." "You risked your entire ship," she pressed, confusion and disbelief twisting inside her. "Hundreds of lives. For me. An outsider. An enemy in all but name. Why?" Kane studied her in silence for a moment. The weight of his gaze pressed against her, not cruel but heavy with truth. "Because," he said finally, "what we protect defines us. If I gave you up, then I would teach my crew that loyalty ends when it is hard, that lives can be traded like coin, and once that lesson is taught, it can never be undone." Zyra's breath caught. She had no reply. Her assistant, Terran, stepped forward, his voice nervous. "Zyra, perhaps the council is wrong. Perhaps the humans—" Zyra raised a hand sharply, but this time her silence was not out of anger. It was because her thoughts were breaking apart. All her life she had believed aggression was barbaric, a curse on any species. But now, as she looked at Kane, she realized something terrifying. Aggression alone was chaos, yes. Aggression without control was destruction. But with control, with loyalty, with sacrifice, it became something else, entirely. It became survival. It became strength. It became protection. And suddenly, she understood why humans had endured so much, why they had risen again and again from wars that should have ended them. They had turned their curse into a weapon not only for themselves, but for those they chose to protect. Her chest tightened. For the first time, Zyra felt not only respect for Kane, but something more dangerous. Something like admiration. She spoke softly, almost to herself. "I believed your aggression was nothing but barbarism, but I was wrong." Kane raised an eyebrow. "Wrong?" Zyra nodded slowly. "Your aggression is fire. I feared it because fire destroys. But I see now. Fire also warms. It protects. It keeps the darkness away. Without it, you would not survive. With it, you may lead." The words surprised even her. To admit them was to betray everything she had believed, and yet they felt true. Kane's lips curved faintly, though not into a smile. More like acknowledgement. "You see now," he said. We are not without flaws. We fight too much. We bleed too often. But when the storm comes, when the shadows rise, we do not bow. That is what makes us human. Zyra's silver eyes searched his face. She saw the weight he carried, the scars of battles past, the quiet strength that held him steady. And in that moment she realized something else. This man, this captain, was not only protecting his crew. He was protecting her as well, an alien who had called him a monster. Her voice was quiet when she asked, "And if I tell the council what I have seen? If I tell them humanity deserves trust?" Kane's gaze softened just slightly. "Then you tell them the truth. Nothing more, nothing less. And if I tell them humanity is still dangerous?" Kane's eyes did not waver. "Then you would not be wrong. We are dangerous, but danger does not always mean evil. Sometimes danger is the only thing standing between life and extinction." His words lingered in the air, sharp and heavy. The bridge lights dimmed back to normal. Repairs continued. The battle was over. But Zyra knew her war, the war within her mind, was only beginning. For the first time, she doubted her people's judgment. For the first time, she wondered if humanity's place in the galaxy was not as outcasts but as leaders. And for the first time, she feared that her heart might not belong fully to her people anymore, but to the truth she had seen in Captain Elias Kane. As she turned to leave the bridge, Kane's voice stopped her. "Zyra." She looked back. He held her gaze, calm and unwavering. "Sometimes," he said, "what you fear most is the only thing that can save you." Zyra's breath caught. She turned away quickly, hiding the storm in her chest. For the first time in her life, she no longer knew what she believed. But one thing was certain. Humanity was not what she thought. And neither was Captain Elias Kane.